Now, most people have been celebrating this holiday in America called Columbus Day. And Columbus was famous for discovering America, even though there was already people here. Before Columbus, according to the historians, everyone thought that the world was flat. And Columbus said, no, I'm going to continue going all the way to that point, and I'm going to get to another piece of land, and I'm not going to fall off the edge. And then when he continued and he got to another land, everyone says, wow, look, Ashrecha, Columbus. The world is not flat. This is just a few hundred years ago. Unfortunately, that entire story is completely false. And the reason why is because Am Yisrael has known that the world is not flat. As a matter of fact, Am Yisrael has known that the globe is a sphere, exactly as we know it today, already from Mount Sinai. And all of this is in the Torah. This first example is in the Gemara, which is a critical part of our oral Torah. We have two Torahs. We have the written Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses, and then the prophets. And then we have the oral Torah. The oral Torah explains what the written Torah actually says. And most people that don't want to believe in Judaism, whether it's because they're Jews and they don't want to keep mitzvot, or they're Christians and they're saying that some other guy came and saved everyone and now you don't have to do anything. All types of nonsense that people create in their mind. But everyone has a problem with this oral Torah. Even though Hashem said that He gave us the oral Torah in Mount Sinai also. But people say, no, but rabbis mentioned their names in the oral Torah. These rabbis weren't alive during Mount Sinai. Yes, but the information in the oral Torah must be divine. And B'ezrat Hashem today we're going to prove that, because the information they had couldn't have been information possessed by a man. The first one being proof that the globe, that the earth is a sphere. In the Mishnah in Masechet Avodah Zarah, page 41. It says that there's all types of Avodah Zarah, there's all types of idol worship, and you're not allowed to benefit in anything that was ever worshipped. Even if it was worshipped for a day, you're not allowed to benefit from it. So the Gemara asks, look, what about if it was a picture? I says, okay, what kind of picture? What if it was a picture of a man? And say, well, if it's a picture of a man holding a bird or holding a ball, you're not allowed to take it. And it's like, okay, why the ball? Why what does it matter what he's holding? The Gemara says that if this man in the picture is holding a ball, then he's representing as if he's a king controlling the entire world. And they're saying, well, why does it represent him controlling the entire world? They say because the ball is a representation of Earth, the planet we live in, and Earth is round. Just like the ball is a sphere, so is the world that we live in. This Gemara was written nearly 2,000 years ago. The Mishnah itself about 2,500 years ago. Columbus, many years later, about 2,000 years later, he did not discover that the world was round. Am Yisrael has already known. Now, in the Torah, we have a lot of things that in our current generation people get shaken up by. For example, when I tell people that if a Jew that does not keep Shabbat, according to the Halakha, according to the Rambam, he says that a Jew that doesn't keep Shabbat is considered a goy, is considered a Gentile. Considered not Jewish. But what kind of a Gentile? Because there's something called Chasdei Umot HaOlam, which is the righteous Gentiles, the righteous non-Jews around the world. Rambam says, no, not the righteous one. These are tzaddikim, they have Olam Haba. The Jew that's not keeping Shabbat, he's considered an idol worshiper. An idol worshiper. He doesn't keep Shabbat, he drives on Shabbat, he smokes cigarettes on Shabbat, watches TV on Shabbat, he's considered a complete idol worshiper. Now when I tell people this during the shul, it shakes them up. They go, what do you mean? I'm a Jew, my mom was a Jew, my dad was a Jew. I went to Beknesset 3 times last year. I give some tzedakah once in a while. What do you mean? I'm not a Jew. Well, according to the Rambam, you're not a Jew. Your Judaism is on suspension. You start keeping Shabbat, suspension's off. Now things like this shake people up. One time I told somebody this, and when he wanted to prove to me that he's a Jew, he took out his Israeli identification, which had on it Jewish. I told him, yes, you know what, you're right, but it doesn't work in Olam Haba because you can't take it. What proof is there that the Torah is really from God? What proof is there? So now Hashem tells us in the Torah, there's certain types of food that you are not allowed to eat. If it's a fish, if you want to eat seafood, it has to have 2 signs. It has to have fins and it has to have scales. This is directly in the Torah. This is in the 5 books of Moses. Hashem says, if a fish has fins and scales, it's kosher. If it doesn't have scales, then it's not kosher. So Chazal says, what do you mean it doesn't have scales? It says, because you'll find fish that just has fins with no scales, but you will never find a fish that just has scales but no fins. Which means that this information cannot come from mankind. Why? Because in order to, if you're going to write this in a book, and you want everyone to follow this book, then that means that you're not going to put something that could easily be proven wrong. If somebody goes, to the beach and fishes a fish, and they find a fish with just scales, you have yourself a mistake in the Torah, chas v'shalom. If there's one mistake in the Torah, the entire book is cancelled. There's no more Judaism. You no longer have to fast on Yom Kippur. You no longer have to keep Shabbat. There cannot be a mistake in the Torah. Why? Because it's divine. Divine means it's from God. God does not make mistakes. So now you have a situation where whoever said this, that every fish that has scales must have fins, must have known every single fish that will ever exist. There's over 2 million species that we know of on earth. There's over 40,000 different types of fish that we know of. That means that whoever said this 3,300 years ago had to have known everything that not only existed back then, but would ever exist, including mutations. And until this day, no one has ever found a fish with just scales, but no fins. You have many fish, like sharks, dolphins, and so on, that just have fins. But you'll never find a fish that just has scales. Which means that even if you find a fish that's cut off, you cut off half the fish, and you don't have the side that has the fins, and you only have scales, the Gemara says, you know for sure that it's kosher. Why? Because you're never going to find a fish that just has the scales. So this is just one simple proof that's in the 5 books of Moses that Be'ezrat Hashem, all of us read every single year, Parashat Shavua. The issue you find this in the 5 books of Moses. Another thing the Torah says is in regards to the animals that we eat. Hashem is a big makpid. He's very, very stringent in regards to what we eat. And the reason why is he says that everything that you ever eat, whether it's ice cream, or it's a steak, or it's an apple, or anything that you're ever going to eat, is going to turn into blood. Whatever doesn't turn into blood will come out of your system. Now who told this food, whether it's a steak, to turn into blood, and then the apple comes in, it also turns into blood. And then on top of that, the burger also turns into blood, and the bun also turns into blood. How come it all turns into blood? Because obviously there's an intelligent designer behind all of this. That this blood, according to Hashem, is part of your neshama, it's part of your soul, which means that you are what you eat. If you eat something impure, you become impure. But what does it mean impure? Does it mean you're a bad person? No, not necessarily. It means that if you try to learn Torah, it becomes nearly impossible. Because the Torah is the only thing that's truly spiritual in the world, and it's complete purity. Which means that if you go to a shiur Torah, and you eat non-kosher food, you're going to be like me when I was first starting to do tshuva. I go to a shiur, I'm completely 100% awake. 5.5 minutes into the shiur, I fall asleep. Why? Because the purity was too much for my neshama to take. So it takes some training and obviously takes some kosher food. Hashem said that how are you going to know if this animal is pure? It says it has to have two signs. It has to have split hooves. It has to chew its cud, redigest its food. You can have approximately 10 different animals that he lists, a little bit more than 10 animals that actually have 10 species that have these two signs. The rest of the animals in the world will not have any sign. It's either two or nothing, except 4. There are 4 animals that have one sign. The pig, the herynx, the rabbit, and the camel. 4 animals. 4 animals only have one of the 2 signs. Every other animal either has 2 signs, which means it's kosher, and the rest of the animals in the world have nothing. What does this mean? This means that if we find animal number 5, there's a mistake in the Torah. If we find another animal with one sign, there's a mistake in the Torah. Baruch Hashem, 3,300 years have passed since we got the Torah, they're still looking. Another interesting thing that Hashem said about the animals, about kosher animals, that we didn't talk about in the last shiur, is that He wanted us to identify the kosher animal from the outside because that's easy for us to know, easier for us to identify. But there's also internal signs inside the animals. Now, according to Judaism, in order for an animal to be allowed for us, to be permitted for us to eat them, they have to be slaughtered in a kosher way. And slaughtered in a kosher way means that the animal cannot suffer, even for 1 second. Now if you look at a slaughter from the outside and you're not familiar with slaughtering, slaughtering looks really horrendous. It doesn't look like it's not painful, but there's actually scientific proof that it's not painful. All of the non-kosher animals, including mankind, have all of the blood at some point travels from the heart to the brain. Now someone is considered alive as long as there's blood going to the brain. As soon as the blood stops going to the brain, you're considered dead. It's not if the blood stops going to the heart. That's just a heart attack and B'ezrat Hashem somebody gets back. But as soon as there's no longer any more blood going to the brain, you're considered clinically dead. So now, as soon as we disconnect the blood from the brain of the animal's officially dead. Meaning that it's no longer functioning, it dies within a matter of less than a second. Now all of the animals have two veins that connect to the brain. On the bottom of their neck and on the top of their neck. Which means that regardless of, let's say for example, if this is the head of a horse, that means that there will be a vein on the bottom and a vein on the top. Even if we cut the vein, if we slaughter it on the bottom, there's still going to be blood coming from the top. Which means that until all the blood comes out of the bottom, he's still going to be alive and he's still going to suffer. He's going to feel the pain because he's still alive. There's still blood going to the brain from the top. So this means that there's no clean way to slaughter a horse or a camel or so on. But if you look at the kosher animals, if you look at the cow, you look at the lamb, you look at the ones that we're allowed to eat, the deer, there's only a few animals. There's a very unique thing about their creation. They also have two veins. But right before they get to the brain, both of the veins connect and become a single vein. Which means that when the rabbi slaughters the animal, he's only cutting one vein, and by the time the remaining blood goes from the end of the vein, from where you cut, to the brain, the animal is already dead. Which means that scientifically, it has never felt pain. If the animal feels pain, it's no longer kosher. So again, this is something that we wouldn't have known 3,300 years ago, unless God told us. And Hashem is telling us that if we have this kosher food, then we can learn His Torah, then we can connect to Him.